progress so far has been really exciting, and although I doubt I'm even 10% of the way done, it's really cool to have something that's starting to look like an airplane already. Like I mentioned in an earlier episode, there's two types of wood that I've used here. Douglas fir as a substitute for spruce, and white ash. White ash is a really strong but heavy wood, so it's only used in the parts of the airplane that really take a beating, like this bottom longeron down here, and the top one where the engine mounts. The rest is pretty much all Douglas fir. The top longeron is special because it's actually a laminate. When I tried to do it in one piece, I couldn't get it to stop splitting, so I had to do it in a bunch of little quarter-inch strips that I glued together. I do know of one other SE5A replica that's like that, so although it's different from the plans, it is at least proven. In this bay right here is where the pilot will sit. You can see a curved crossmember down at the bottom where the control stick will go, and in this bay right here is where the passenger seat will go, if I end up having one. And this bay right here with the curved crossmembers is where the fuel tank will mount. The sad thing is, I'm actually going to have to take this all apart, because the wood doesn't have any varnish on it, and the fittings aren't painted, so this is basically just a mock-up right now. Since I'm trying to do this as cheaply as I possibly can, it's going to be really interesting to see how much this ends up costing me in the end. So far I spent $360 on a really big load of Douglas fir that I've used about half of so far. I spent $80 on some white ash that's pretty much used up by now, and I've spent $320 on some steel that I've used about half of so far. So, up to this point, I've spent about $760. Those of you who have worked with airplanes before were probably horrified when you noticed that I was using grade 5 bolts from the hardware store instead of AM bolts. I'm cheap, but I'm not cheap enough to endanger my life, so don't worry, when I assemble everything for the final time, I'll use AM bolts. The reason why it's so important to use AM bolts is because the way that AM bolts are made is a lot different. They actually have the threads rolled in instead of being cut, which makes them a lot stronger because it preserves the grain of the steel. Another safety concern that I should probably go ahead and address is the steel that I used to make the fittings in the last episode. The fittings were made with 16 gauge mild steel with a little bit of 1/8 inch mild steel at the top. This is pretty unusual because airplanes these days are rarely made with anything other than chromoly. Chromoly is a lot stronger than regular steel, so that's why they use it. But back in World War I, mild steel is pretty much all they had available, so this is what the fittings were originally made with. This is a point of argument in the World War I replica community. A lot of people prefer to switch to modern chromoly for extra safety, but there's other people that just use mild steel like what the originals did. Personally, I think it's fine to use mild steel. It's what they used originally, and even though it's weaker, the safety factor is there because that's what it was designed for. I'm really excited about how far things have come lately. It's really motivating to be able to sit on a bucket and get a feel for how big the plane's going to be and what the pilot's perspective is going to be like. In the next few episodes, I'll do a little bit of woodworking that's still left to do on the fuselage, paint the fittings, varnish the wood, and do the fuselage bracing. My big goal is to try and get a tail done before the end of the summer. Thanks for watching!